Previously on the Originals, after years of struggle, Haley revives the Mikaelson family using wolf venom while fending off relentless enemies and reuniting with her long-lost love. Meanwhile, Klaus, imprisoned by Marcel, becomes a pawn in a deadly game of power and revenge. The man drew a voodoo circle on the ground in front of him. The circle would ensure that any vampire who entered could only go in, but not out. Vampires begin to pour into the Originals mansion and a big show was about to unfold. Marcel dragged a starving, barely conscious Klaus out of the dungeon. He was chained and then thrown into the witchcraft circle. The once invincible hybrid of the Originals was utterly humiliated. Silently enduring his enemy's torment, Marcel handed a sword to Alistair, telling him that the blade was coated with his venom, and granted him the honor of killing Klaus himself. Alistair grabbed the sword, stepped into the witchcraft circle, and without hesitation, kicked Klaus away. He savored the moment, relishing in the act of degrading Klaus, but he crossed Klaus's line. Alistair declared that he would find Klaus's daughter and completely wipe out his bloodline. Klaus exploded. He grabbed the chain, knocked Alistair down, and sank his teeth into his neck. Alistair died instantly. Klaus did not stop his rampage. He wielded the sword and chain, killing two other vampires who were watching the scene unfold. The Originals hybrid's combat prowess struck fear into everyone around him. Marcel rushed out just in time to overpower Klaus. Seizing the opportunity to assert his own authority, he declared that he was keeping Klaus alive only to extract his blood to cure werewolf bites. He emphasized his ability to control Klaus at all times and warned the vampires to follow the rules of the city and not to challenge his authority. When Klaus regained consciousness, he found himself back in the dungeon where he had been imprisoned for the past 5 years. Seething with unvented rage, Klaus mocked his adopted son, saying that even though Marcel now possessed greater power, at his core, he was still just a little boy who needed his daddy's protection. Perhaps Klaus had poked at Marcel's reliance on him, and his words completely enraged Marcel. In a fury, Marcel plunged the hooked dagger back into Klaus's body, causing him to fall into unconsciousness once again. But Marcel had no idea that Haley had already fully resurrected the rest of the Originals' bloodline. Haley checked on Elijah's arm, relieved to find that the deadly bite had completely healed. Cole and Rebecca, unable to endure their hunger any longer, had already gone out in search of food. After 5 long years of downfall and servitude, the Mikaelson siblings had finally regained their freedom.
Then there's just one person left.
Let's go get him.
Cole! Would you please? Thank you.
The Mikaelson siblings, who had been asleep for 5 years, were now enjoying a buffet while discussing how to rescue Klaus. Haley pointed out that half of New Orleans was their enemy, so they needed to act quickly. Cole, a bit fearful, suggested that they should lure Marcel out of New Orleans first and take their time, but his sisters mocked him for being too cowardly. Elijah, no longer hesitant, declared that they would rescue their brother today. Josh had finally moved on from the pain of losing Aiden and had started dating a human boyfriend. They were sharing a sweet kiss when Josh suddenly sensed something was wrong. He quickly made an excuse to send his boyfriend away.
Well, thanks for waiting and not just, killing him.
Elijah and Rebecca slowly emerged, assuring him not to worry about arranging lunch, as they had already eaten. Josh didn't want to waste time talking to them and just asked them to finish their business quickly and leave. Freya, along with Haley and Cole, returned to her little base in New Orleans. She planned to cast a spell there to locate Klaus. Rebecca said she would go distract Marcel since she was the only one in the family who didn't have to worry about being killed by him. Josh attempted to secretly text Marcel to warn him, but Elijah caught on to his intentions. Panicking, he insisted that he was of no use there and suggested that he could just order them a pizza instead. Elijah took his phone away. While the siblings were arguing, Elijah's phone rang. Freya had found Klaus's location. Klaus was struggling in agony, and in his mind, he envisioned Camille, dressed in white. Camille embodied everything light within him, while the tormented Klaus believed himself to be the embodiment of darkness. But Camille kept reminding Klaus that his sacrifice had saved the entire family. Rebecca lured Marcel to the witch's cemetery. Marcel took her hand, confirming that the scar on Rebecca's hand had fully healed. Rebecca pleaded with him to spare her brothers, but Marcel refused without hesitation. Rebecca, disappointed, said that the man she loved would never have been so cruel. Marcel responded that the man she loved had been killed by her brother's own hands. He pointed to Davina's grave, saying that they had killed the adopted daughter he loved most. Marcel didn't want to continue the conversation with Rebecca. As Marcel turned to leave, Rebecca, desperate, pulled out a dagger and aimed it at him. Josh cleared out all the patrons from the bar, Freya mentioned that the hidden passageways here extended to almost every corner of the city. Josh tried to slip away, but Elijah blocked his path. Cole decided to stay behind and keep an eye on Josh, to prevent him from warning Marcel. Freya and her brother entered the passage. Klaus was still battling his inner demons. Camille pointed out that he must have sensed his connection with his siblings had been severed, and that all he needed to do was summon the courage to pull the dagger from his chest to reunite with his family. But Klaus hesitated, lacking the courage to save himself. He was terrified of facing the daughter he hadn't seen in 5 years, afraid of shattering the heroic image he had built in her mind. Klaus finally admitted his deep-seated fear. He would rather suffer in the dungeon than be a bad father. Rebecca's strange behavior made Marcel suspicious, and he realized he had walked into a trap. His current girlfriend shot his ex-girlfriend in the chest with a crossbow. Marcel instructed Sophia not to harm Rebecca, as he needed to deal with her brothers first. The original siblings finally found where Klaus was being held, but a transparent magical barrier blocked them. Freya needed time to break the barrier, while Elijah stood guard. Freya connected to Haley's energy, knelt down, and began chanting. Cole, filled with sorrow, was looking at a photo of his girlfriend. Josh voluntarily started talking about his experience of losing Aiden, saying that time would heal all of Cole's wounds. Cole didn't understand why Josh was telling him this. Josh explained that he felt Davina would want him to say it, but then Josh's phone buzzed. He received a coded message from Marcel. Cole demanded to know what the code meant. Josh had no choice but to tell him that Marcel knew they were in New Orleans and was planning to ambush them. In a panic, Cole snapped Josh's neck.
You're lucky Davina liked you.
Freya and Haley were still chanting the spell with all their might, but Elijah sharply sensed movement outside. Marcel had already entered the house, leaving Elijah no choice but to face him alone. Old enemies confronted each other, and without a word, they immediately began to exchange blows. But Elijah was no match for Marcel and had to fight desperately to buy his sister time. Meanwhile, Sophia and her men were guarding Rebecca when they were suddenly attacked by Cole. Cole clutched one of the minions' hearts and prepared to strike Sophia. Sophia fled in panic. Cole pulls the arrow out of Rebecca's heart, and then fights with the enemy coming up behind him. Rebecca soon joined the battle. Together, the siblings easily dealt with all the enemies. Seeing that Elijah was gradually being overwhelmed, Freya had to speed up her incantation, tearing a hole in the magical barrier. Freya signaled for Haley to go help, while she used her hands to keep the gap open. Klaus also finally began to save himself, trying to pull the dagger out of his chest. The fight between Elijah and Marcel reached a fever pitch. Haley rushed out in a panic to stop the two.
Hope needs her father, Marcel.
Yeah, I had Klaus as a father. It didn't turn out so well, did it?
Freya can't hold out on her own, and as the circle is about to close again, Camille urges Klaus to try harder. As his daughter is still waiting for him at home, Klaus finally made up his mind and reached into his chest. Haley pleaded with Marcel to let them go, but an enraged Marcel refused. He bared his fangs, ready to end the fight, but was suddenly ambushed by Klaus from behind. The hooked dagger plunged into Marcel's chest. Elijah hurried to catch his brother, who was almost too weak from hunger to stand, but Marcel managed to grab hold of the dagger. Taking advantage of Marcel's struggle to pull out the dagger, they hurriedly escaped. Rebecca and Cole had already arrived at the rendezvous point. Cole fretted that Marcel might already be treating his brothers like snacks, but Rebecca thanked him.
For what?
For coming to get me, so I could be sitting here annoyed at you.
Cole finally smiled. The siblings supported Klaus as they emerged from the sewers. Haley warned that Marcel was right behind them and that they needed to run farther, but Marcel calmly blocked their path. The Mikaelson siblings showed a hint of panic, but Marcel didn't attack immediately, saying they shouldn't have returned to the city. Rebecca stepped forward to shield her brothers and sisters.
If you want to kill one of us, you'll have to kill us all.
Klaus stepped forward to calm the conflict. He voluntarily proposed that they would never set foot in New Orleans again. He didn't want to continue this endless cycle of hatred with Marcel, nor did he want Hope to grow up and feel compelled to seek revenge for him. He suggested they let go of their grudges and forget each other. Marcel accepted the truce, saying he hadn't killed them because he didn't want to become a monster like them. They were finally free. The Mikaelson family finally returned to Haley's country villa, but Klaus lingered at the door, hesitant to enter. One by one, his siblings went inside, and Haley invited Klaus to follow. He took a deep breath and slowly followed in Haley's footsteps, watching his daughter sleep. Klaus didn't want to wake her. He gazed at her with contentment, tears welling up in his eyes. Yet he couldn't help but smile. Adam was exploring the old abandoned house alone. He pushed open a door with fear. A strange, indistinct symbol on the wall caught his attention, but he didn't notice the faint blue light behind him, glowing with a mysterious aura. The blue light gradually grew stronger, casting onto Adam's shadow. Curious, Adam turned around, his young eyes wide with fear. A sharp scream pierced the air. Mary turned on the light in Hope's room just as Hope woke up from a nightmare. Mary comforted Hope, but she didn't notice the drawings scattered on the floor, images that depicted the same symbols Adam had seen on the wall. The witches quickly took note of Adam's disappearance, but the tracking spell failed to work. Unusually so, even the police, with their contacts, had no leads. Vincent questioned Adam's mother, Maxine, asking if Adam had recently taken an interest in any adventurous activities. The police had found a haunted house, and Vincent decided to investigate. Maxine handed Vincent a protective charm, saying she had prepared it for her son, hoping it might help him. Vincent soon found the old house where Adam had gone missing, but at that moment, the old house was filled with even more eerie occurrences. The door slammed shut on its own, and a powerful force hurled Vincent against the wall. The eerie blue light reappeared in the hallway ahead. Vincent tried to use a spell to counter it, but the blue light only intensified, coalescing into a conscious orb that floated toward him. The magic was useless. The blue light launched an attack on Vincent. In desperation, Vincent pulled out the charm Maxine had given him, which finally repelled the blue light, restoring calm to the hallway. Vincent had no idea what had just attacked him. Summoning his courage, Vincent pressed forward, hoping to uncover more clues, but a magic mark gradually appears on the wall, and he doesn't seem to be unfamiliar with this thing. Vincent pried open a wooden board, pulling out his phone with one hand to call Marcel, while using a small knife to cut his palm, letting the blood drip onto the floor in front of him. The mechanism on the secret compartment door automatically unlocked. He retrieved a diary from the hidden compartment. Afterward, he left a message for Marcel.
Look, I tell you, this city, everyone in it is in danger.
The seal on the diary is the magic seal. Vincent's mind flashed back to 8 years ago when Eva was still a kind-hearted and beautiful wife. The couple lived a sweet and happy life together. Eva had just discovered she was pregnant, but Vincent was obsessed with studying dark magic to overthrow Marcel's rule in New Orleans. Eva wanted to leave with her husband, but Vincent insisted that New Orleans was a paradise for witches to grow. Marcel arrived in a hurry, having just learned about Adam's disappearance, but Vincent said it was black magic, and no matter who was behind it, Adam was surely not the last sacrificial victim. Kinney also arrived at the church with shocking news. There were 3 more cases of missing children in the French Quarter, and the police were forming a task force to investigate, but Vincent urged him to forget the case, warning that the supernatural forces involved were beyond what humans could defeat. Marcel mentioned he had just discovered an old house suddenly emitting a strange blue light. They decided to split up and take action, but Marcel suddenly noticed the diary in the fire pit. Untouched by the flames, Vincent was on high alert.
I want you to keep that book far away from me. If I even try to come for it, I want you to kill me.
Hello?
Hello?
Mom, can I go play in the garden?
Yeah.
Hope wakes up with her relatives, who have been missing for 5 years, looking at her as the only bloodline of the Originals family in 1,000 years. It was hard to say whether the child or the adults were more nervous at that moment. Hope hurriedly walked out into the garden. Klaus watched his daughters back with a sense of longing. After 5 years apart, he knew he needed time to win back his daughter's affection. He suspected that Haley might have spoken poorly of him to their daughter. Haley assured him that she only said good things, always painting Klaus as a heroic figure, telling Hope that her father had been protecting her all along. But Klaus was skeptical, though he was willing to do anything to earn his daughter's love.
You were her fairy tale prince, Klaus. And now you're real. You have a lot to live up to.
The original siblings were also reconsidering their own lives. Rebecca asked her brother what his plans were, considering this was the first time in 1,000 years that Elijah wasn't busy saving Klaus's soul. Elijah, now without a central purpose, was at a loss. He tossed the question back to his sister, pointing out that she and Marcel clearly had no future together, so was she still searching for true love? The conversation left both siblings feeling depressed. Rebecca kissed her brother on the cheek, saying they both needed to seriously think about that question. Meanwhile, Keelan was still locked in the storage room. Haley felt pity for her fellow werewolf and bent down to remove the poison-producing device from Keelan's face, only to suddenly realize that her wounds had barely healed. Keelan accused her of betraying her own kind for the sake of a group of vampires. Freya walked in and, without a word, placed the mask back on Keelan, explaining that she needed to make more antidotes quickly to prevent her brothers from being bitten by Marcel again. Haley couldn't stand it and turned away. Leaving, Klaus finally mustered the courage to approach his daughter. Hope was engrossed in her drawing.
That's lovely.
She appreciated her father's praise and started chatting with him.
Mom said you like to paint too.
I do. Very much.
Their conversation ended quickly. Klaus was nearly in tears with disappointment, but Hope casually handed him a sheet of paper and then continued drawing. Surprised but happy, Klaus couldn't help but sit down at the table and pick up a pencil to draw alongside his daughter. Every now and then, they would sneak glances at each other. Cole was hiding away, secretly eating, when Rebecca scolded him for his selfish behavior. Cole just wanted to leave this place as soon as possible, but considering that Hope and Klaus still needed time to bond, the family had no choice but to stay in the house, risking their lives, after finally escaping the illusion of their dream world. Today happened to be Davina's 23rd birthday, leaving Cole in an unusually low and angry mood. Freya, showing some mercy, finally prepared some herbs to treat Keelan's wounds. She asked Keelan why she didn't have the same super healing abilities as other werewolves. Keelan explained that even microorganisms are biological entities, and she used medical methods to suppress her werewolf nature because she preferred to live a normal human life. They found common ground, and a spark of romance began to bloom between them.